HR demoted me after I reported my manager's behavior. They didn't expect the compliance officer to call my extension. This is for team harmony, Heather said, sliding the reassignment letter across her polished desk. My hands trembled as I read the words. Demotion to administrative assistant. Effective immediately. Behind Heather's shoulder, Evan smirked through the glass window like he'd just won the lottery. This is because I reported him, isn't it? I stammered, my voice barely above a whisper. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Heather folded her manicured hands. Let's keep emotions out of this, Lauren. It's strictly a business decision. My voice cracked as I pushed the unsigned document back toward her. I won't sign this. I stood up on shaking legs, tears burning my eyes. As I walked toward the door, I heard the soft electronic beep behind me. My office access card had just been deactivated before I even reached the hallway. I drove home in complete shock, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. The meeting kept replaying in my mind like a broken movie reel. Every red light felt like torture. At home, my answering machine blinked with a message from Mom reminding me that rent was due next Friday. How could I possibly explain this disaster to anyone? I grabbed my phone and tried logging into my company email. Access denied. The 2 words on the screen felt like a punch to the gut. Then my phone buzzed with a company-wide notification. A new staff announcement had just been posted. Evan Williams has been promoted to Senior Project Manager, effective immediately. The man who had been harassing me for months was getting rewarded while I was being destroyed. I stared at his smiling headshot until the screen went dark. 3 months ago, everything had been perfect. I loved my job as marketing coordinator at Pinnacle Industries. My supervisor constantly praised my organizational skills and creative campaigns. Lauren always delivers exceptional results, she would tell our biggest clients. Then Evan started messaging me after work hours. At first, it seemed professional, questions about upcoming projects and deadlines. But soon the messages became personal compliments about my presentation style and appearance. When the compliments turned into inappropriate suggestions, I politely asked him to keep our communication strictly professional. The next morning during our team meeting, Evan's entire attitude had changed. He called my latest campaign ideas unfocused and completely unprofessional. After our monthly team dinner, he cornered me by the elevator bank. Wine on his breath, he leaned close and whispered, "People who cause trouble around here don't last very long." I spent the entire weekend documenting everything. Screenshots of inappropriate messages, dates and times of uncomfortable encounters, names of potential witnesses who had seen his behavior. Monday morning, I walked into Human Resources with a thick folder full of evidence against Evan. Heather Thompson seemed genuinely sympathetic during our hour-long meeting. She took detailed notes and promised me complete confidentiality. "We take these allegations very seriously," she assured me with what seemed like sincere concern. But something felt wrong during our conversation. I noticed a small red light blinking steadily in the corner of the room. A security camera was recording our supposedly confidential discussion. 2 days later, my worst fears were confirmed. Evan passed me in the hallway and whispered with a cold smile, "Nice try with your little complaint." My blood turned to ice water. Someone had already broken the promise of confidentiality, and the retaliation was about to begin. The workplace retaliation started immediately and was brutal in its efficiency. Evan began excluding me from important client meetings I had been scheduled to attend for weeks. Colleagues started whispering that I was causing unnecessary drama and couldn't handle normal workplace pressure. I received my first negative performance review in over 3 years with the company. The feedback was harsh and completely unfair, criticizing work that had previously been praised by everyone. My friend Alex from the accounting department pulled me aside during lunch break. "Watch your back carefully," he whispered while glancing around nervously. "They're actively rewriting your entire professional story." That afternoon, an email from HR appeared in my inbox with an ominous subject line, "Performance Improvement Plan, Immediate Action Required." I had 90 days to address serious behavioral concerns or face immediate termination. The document felt like a death sentence typed in corporate language. The stress completely consumed my life outside of work. I couldn't sleep through the night, couldn't keep food down, and my stomach stayed in constant painful knots. Every morning felt like walking into a battlefield where I was the only target. Evan changed my project assignments every week, seemingly designed to set me up for failure. I started finding obvious errors in my computer files that I absolutely never made. During our mandatory weekly check-ins, Heather would shake her head with fake sympathy. "You seem so emotional and unstable lately, Lauren. Perhaps you should consider whether this demanding environment is truly right for your personality type." The systematic gaslighting was relentless and professionally devastating. Then our IT support technician dropped a bombshell that changed everything. "Someone logged into your computer remotely after business hours last Tuesday," he told me quietly. The unauthorized access came directly from an HR department terminal. They weren't just retaliating against my harassment complaint. They were actively sabotaging my work to justify their predetermined actions. In desperation, I formally requested an internal transfer to any other department within the company. Heather's response was swift and deliberately cruel. "We absolutely don't reward frivolous complaints by simply moving problem employees around, Lauren. You need to work through your obvious personal issues right here." I finally broke down crying in the women's bathroom that afternoon, unable to hold back the overwhelming stress anymore. Through the thin stall door, I could hear two junior employees laughing about my situation. "Did you see Lauren crying again today? So completely unprofessional." I heard from management that she's totally unstable and can't handle any real pressure. Something fundamental inside me snapped at that moment. Not from anger or despair, but from sudden crystal clarity. I would stop begging for basic fairness. I would stop pleading for simple decency. Instead, I would carefully document every single thing they did to me. That evening, I bought a small spiral notebook and wrote on the first page, "Day 1, they have no idea what's coming." Every evening after work, I transformed into a meticulous detective investigating my own professional destruction. I recorded exact times, specific dates, complete witness lists, detailed conversations, and precise email timestamps. I printed physical copies of every important document and stored them in a secure personal folder at home. At work, my entire demeanor underwent a complete strategic transformation. No more visible tears, no more desperate pleading, no more emotional outbursts. Just calm professionalism and careful observation of every interaction. Evan noticed the significant change and seemed quite pleased with himself. "Looks like Lauren has finally learned to keep her head down and mouth shut," he told several colleagues within my earshot. He thought he had successfully broken my spirit and destroyed my resistance. Exactly 1 week later, another email arrived from HR. They were adjusting my role downward due to ongoing and serious performance concerns. The official demotion letter was attached. As I read through the corporate language, I almost smiled. They had just handed me even more concrete evidence of systematic retaliation. My new workspace was a cramped cubicle positioned near the noisy supply closet, deliberately humiliating and isolating. Former colleagues avoided making eye contact as they hurried past my desk. I discovered that my calendar access had been completely revoked, yet HR was simultaneously documenting unexplained attendance inconsistencies in my personnel file. The obvious contradiction was breathtakingly hypocritical. That night at home, I carefully reviewed my copy of the original harassment complaint I had filed months earlier. Something small caught my attention in the digital signature block, a tiny typo that I would absolutely never make in any professional document. My heart started racing as the disturbing truth became clear. It wasn't actually my real digital signature on the complaint. HR had deliberately edited and altered my original words to weaken my case. The corruption and document tampering went much deeper than I had initially imagined. But now I had concrete proof of their illegal manipulation. Each night, I organized my growing evidence more systematically. They thought they were burying me alive. Instead, they were systematically digging their own professional graves. I spent an entire evening researching the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission website for the first time. I didn't file any official complaints yet, just carefully read about my legal rights and available options. I learned that systematic retaliation documentation could be extremely powerful in federal court if clear patterns of abuse could be established. I definitely had documented patterns. Lots of them, all carefully organized and timestamped. My evidence folder grew significantly thicker each passing day. Screenshots of inappropriate messages, printed copies of threatening emails, handwritten notes with precise timestamps of every hostile encounter. I was methodically building an absolutely ironclad legal case against people who believed they were completely untouchable. Late that night, as I organized everything in chronological order, my cell phone rang unexpectedly. The caller ID display made my heart skip several beats. Corporate Compliance Office, External Division. A calm, professional female voice spoke when I nervously answered. "Hello, Lauren. This is Denise Miller from External Corporate Compliance. I understand you might have some serious concerns about HR procedures at your current location." Someone with real authority inside the company was definitely watching this situation unfold. "I'm currently conducting a comprehensive audit of HR procedures across multiple company locations," Denise explained in a calm, reassuring voice. "Several employees at different sites have mentioned significant procedural irregularities that require immediate investigation." I hesitated for several long seconds, then carefully admitted that something was seriously wrong with how my situation was being handled. "My strongest advice is this. Don't confront them directly about anything," she warned me. "Just continue following every single company protocol meticulously. Document absolutely everything that happens. Can you commit to doing that consistently?" I assured her that I absolutely could and would. After hanging up, I felt genuine hope for the first time in months of hell. Someone with real corporate authority was finally paying attention to what was happening. The very next morning, that fragile hope turned to immediate alarm. Heather had suddenly scheduled an unexpected exit interview for that same afternoon. My employment contract didn't officially end for another 3 weeks. Why were they rushing this process so aggressively? I arrived at the HR office to find Heather waiting with a thick stack of papers and a digital recording device prominently displayed on the conference table. "Several colleagues have recently reported that you've been gossiping maliciously and creating an unnecessarily hostile work environment," Heather began, reading directly from what appeared to be carefully prepared notes. I kept my voice completely calm and professional. "Can you please provide me with written documentation of these specific claims?" She refused immediately, waving her hand dismissively. "We don't need to provide detailed proof of obvious workplace disruption in order to address it appropriately." I smiled slightly and discreetly pressed the record button on my phone's voice memo app, carefully hidden inside my blazer pocket. For the next 30 minutes, she made serious accusations without providing any evidence, threatened my future employment prospects, and systematically painted me as the primary villain in this entire situation. "You'll deeply regret dragging this unfortunate situation out any longer than necessary," she concluded with obvious coldness. "Some professional bridges, once burned completely, can never be rebuilt again." I thanked her politely for her time and left the office. That evening, I immediately emailed the entire recorded conversation to Denise Miller. Her response arrived within 1 hour. "This recording changes absolutely everything." The next morning in the parking lot, a quiet coworker named Mason from the logistics department approached me nervously. He kept glancing around to make sure nobody else was watching our conversation. "I personally witnessed what they did to you," he whispered urgently. "But more importantly, they did the exact same thing to Anita Rodriguez before she quit last year under mysterious circumstances." He quickly handed me a small USB drive. These are old HR meeting minutes that Heather thought she had permanently deleted from all company servers. But nothing is ever truly gone from our backup systems if you know where to look. I stared at the tiny device in my palm, hardly believing what was happening. "Why are you risking your job to help me?" I asked quietly. Mason shrugged and looked around again. Because what they're doing to good people is completely wrong. And because someone with courage needs to finally stop them. That night, I plugged in the drive with trembling hands. What I discovered made me gasp out loud. HR internal memos timestamped weeks before I had filed any formal complaint, already labeling me a potential liability requiring immediate management intervention. I stayed awake until almost dawn, carefully reading through deleted files that exposed the entire systematic conspiracy. HR had detailed knowledge about multiple harassment complaints against Evan dating back over 2 years. They had deliberately buried and ignored every single one to protect their valuable team member. There were explicit email discussions about various strategies to manage problematic employees and protect valuable team members from frivolous accusations. My case wasn't unique or isolated. It was part of a well-established pattern of corporate cover-up and victim retaliation. I forwarded everything to Denise through a secure, encrypted email account. Her response arrived at sunrise. This evidence is absolutely explosive. Federal employment guidelines require immediate intervention. Sit tight and continue acting completely normal. That same afternoon, Evan sent me a completely unexpected email. The subject line read, "Sincere apology and professional fresh start." After months of harassment and systematic retaliation, he suddenly wanted to meet in the cafeteria to clear the air and move forward with a positive professional relationship. The timing seemed highly suspicious. I definitely smelled an obvious trap. I met Evan in the crowded employee cafeteria, maintaining polite distance while staying completely professional. He spoke loudly and theatrically, ensuring that other employees could clearly hear his carefully rehearsed public apology. I sincerely realize there may have been unfortunate misunderstandings about my management communication style, he said, clasping his hands with practiced earnestness. I genuinely want us to establish a fresh, positive professional relationship moving forward. Other colleagues turned to watch the performance, probably thinking this public display resolved all the underlying problems. I kept my responses minimal and strictly professional throughout the conversation. As we talked, my phone quietly buzzed with a text message from Denise, perfect timing. This entire conversation is being officially recorded through security footage that I specifically requested be preserved. That evening, I learned that the security video of Evan's public apology had mysteriously disappeared overnight. Someone with administrative privileges was working extremely hard to control and manipulate the official narrative. But Denise was working even harder to preserve evidence they couldn't destroy. The IT security department contacted Denise's office directly when they discovered someone had attempted to override the automatic deletion logs on the cafeteria security footage. That someone possessed high-level administrative privileges within the HR computer system. Denise now had federal authority to investigate potential obstruction of justice and evidence tampering. She instructed me to keep working quietly and normally while she built her comprehensive legal case. But staying quiet became absolutely impossible when Heather cornered me alone in an empty conference room. "You don't understand the serious consequences of what you're doing," she hissed, her professional mask finally slipping completely. "If you continue pushing this ridiculous investigation, you'll destroy good people's careers. Decent people with families and mortgages. You need to think very carefully about your own professional reputation." I looked directly into her eyes and said with complete calm, "Are you officially asking me to drop a federal employment complaint?" Her face went completely white. She had just made another clearly documented threat that I could use as evidence. The trap was closing around her, and she was starting to realize it. "That's absolutely not what I was saying," Heather backpedaled frantically, but I was already composing a detailed email summary of our entire conversation in my mind. I began typing the summary immediately, including exact quotes and precise timestamps, while she watched helplessly. I sent the documentation to myself while she stood there, creating an immediate electronic record with automatic timestamps. "Every single conversation is evidence now," I told her quietly but firmly. "Every threat, every act of retaliation, every attempt to silence me or intimidate me. You're not controlling this narrative anymore. That evening, Denise called with news that made my hands shake. Federal employment auditors would arrive at our office within the week. Your meticulous documentation has triggered something much bigger than your individual case, she explained. This isn't just about your harassment complaint anymore. We're now looking at systematic violations of federal employment law across multiple departments. I felt vindicated but also genuinely terrified. People with entrenched power don't surrender it quietly. Evan and Heather would definitely strike back hard before federal oversight could lock them down permanently. The entire office atmosphere became eerily quiet and tense overnight. Evan began acting cheerful and helpful with everyone, greeting colleagues with exaggerated friendliness and enthusiasm. Heather announced she was taking a well-deserved vacation precisely as federal auditors were scheduled to arrive for their investigation. Colleagues started gathering in small groups and whispering in corners, clearly sensing that something major was happening behind the scenes. Then corporate headquarters sent a company-wide email about an upcoming comprehensive policy compliance review to ensure best practices across all departments. They didn't mention any specific names, but absolutely everyone understood the implications immediately. The Office Whisper network spreads news incredibly fast in our relatively small workplace. By lunch break, everyone knew that federal investigators were coming to examine company practices. Some people avoided me like I was carrying a contagious disease. Others gave me subtle nods of support and encouragement. The entire power dynamic was shifting dramatically, and everyone could feel the change in the air. Major changes were coming whether Evan and Heather were prepared for them or not. Heather returned from her suspicious vacation with a team of expensive corporate lawyers in tow. They requested an immediate private meeting and offered me a surprisingly generous severance package in exchange for signing a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement. This arrangement resolves everything amicably for all parties involved, the lead attorney explained with practiced smoothness. You get a completely fresh start elsewhere, and everyone moves forward professionally without any ongoing complications. I politely requested all the specific offer details in writing, then immediately forwarded the entire document to Denise Miller. Her response was swift and razor-sharp. This is textbook witness tampering and intimidation. They just made this a serious federal case with criminal implications. Within just a few hours, the corporate lawyers called back to completely retract their settlement offer. Something significant behind the scenes had shifted dramatically in my favor. The investigation was no longer something they could control, contain, or make disappear quietly. Federal authority had officially taken over the case, and my careful documentation had given investigators everything they needed to build an absolutely airtight case against multiple company officials. Denise called with news that made my hands tremble with vindication and relief. Your harassment complaint uncovered systematic falsification of HR records across multiple company departments nationwide. They'd been protecting certain managers company-wide by destroying evidence and systematically retaliating against anyone who filed complaints. My individual case had triggered a massive federal investigation involving multiple company locations. I felt completely vindicated but warned Denise that Evan would probably try something desperate before everything collapsed around him. He's cornered now, and cornered people often do extremely stupid things. That very afternoon, my prediction proved absolutely accurate. During our regular department meeting, Evan publicly threw Heather under the bus in front of everyone. I was simply following explicit HR directives for all my management decisions, he announced loudly. Every action I took was pre-approved by Human Resources leadership. He was desperately trying to save himself by sacrificing his co-conspirator. But it was far too late for both of them. The federal investigation had already documented their extensive collaboration in systematic harassment cover-ups. Upper management summoned both Evan and Heather for emergency meetings with executives I had never seen before. I watched through the glass conference room walls as they were escorted to separate rooms by stern-looking corporate officials. The tension throughout the office was absolutely suffocating. People pretended to work normally while stealing nervous glances at the closed conference room doors. At exactly 3 p.m., HR sent an email to all staff members, office operations are suspended for the remainder of today. Please gather your personal belongings and exit the building immediately. I sat alone at my cramped desk near the supply closet, breathing shakily as colleagues filed past me toward the exits. Some looked at me with sympathy, others with barely concealed resentment for causing all this trouble. My phone buzzed with a message from Denise. Tomorrow morning, everything goes public. Federal findings will be officially announced. Are you emotionally ready for this? I typed back with steady fingers. I'd been ready for months. The moment of truth was finally arriving. Corporate headquarters issued a formal public statement acknowledging serious breaches of internal policy and federal employment guidelines throughout multiple company divisions. Denise's comprehensive investigation became part of an official compliance announcement sent to all employees and posted prominently on the company website. No specific names were mentioned in the announcement, but absolutely everyone noticed who was suddenly missing from their usual workstations. Evan's corner office was completely cleared out by security personnel within an hour of the public announcement. His nameplate, family photos, motivational posters, and personal belongings disappeared as if he had never existed. But Heather remained stubbornly in her HR office, sitting at her desk and pretending to work while acting as if she had been just following orders from above throughout this entire situation. She seemed to genuinely believe she could survive by claiming ignorance and shifting blame upward. That desperate strategy lasted exactly one business day before harsh reality finally caught up with her actions and decisions. Denise met me face to face for the first time outside a quiet coffee shop near the office building. She handed me an official letter from corporate headquarters on company letterhead. The company had found that my demotion was clearly retaliatory and violated multiple federal employment laws. They offered complete reinstatement to my original position, full back pay for lost wages, and substantial compensation for emotional distress and damage to my career. I read through the legal document twice before responding thoughtfully. I'll only accept it if company policies are completely rewritten and mandatory anti-harassment training is implemented for all management personnel. Denise smiled warmly and nodded approvingly. Already agreed to by the board of directors. Zero tolerance for retaliation going forward, with external oversight. As we shook hands professionally, her phone buzzed with an urgent message. Heather's been given exactly 24 hours to resign voluntarily or face immediate termination for cause, she informed me. The evidence against her is absolutely overwhelming and undeniable. Justice was finally being served properly after months of systematic abuse. The next afternoon, Heather appeared unexpectedly at my newly reinstated office door. Tears streamed down her face as she stood in the doorway, wringing her hands desperately. "Lauren, I honestly never meant for things to escalate this far," she whispered with obvious desperation. "I was genuinely trying to protect the company from expensive lawsuits. I thought if we managed the situation quietly and internally." I remained completely calm, keeping my voice steady and professional. "We both understand that choices have serious consequences, Heather. You chose to protect a harasser instead of investigating the person reporting him. You chose systematic retaliation instead of proper investigation. Those were deliberate decisions you made repeatedly." Security personnel arrived to gently but firmly escort her out of the building for the final time. As I watched her walk away forever, I felt something I hadn't experienced in many months of hell. Complete peace and closure. The people who had tried so hard to destroy my career had ultimately destroyed themselves instead through their own choices. 6 months later, I stood confidently before a room full of new company employees, leading our now mandatory ethics and harassment prevention training session. "Why are you so passionate about company policy and procedures?" one new hire asked with genuine curiosity. I smiled softly, thinking about everything I had survived and overcome. Because once, HR demoted me immediately after I reported sexual harassment. But I documented every single thing that happened, and truth always has a way of surfacing eventually. They laughed nervously, unsure whether I was being completely serious. My phone rang as the training session concluded. Caller ID displayed, Corporate Compliance Office. I answered with the confidence I had earned through months of fighting for what was right. Lauren Brooks, Employee Integrity Liaison speaking. The new title still felt fresh, but the responsibility felt absolutely perfect. Justice didn't happen by accident or luck. I built it carefully, one documented truth at a time.